Hello and welcome to Video Game Hangover. I'm Randy Dickinson and I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Hello, I'm DJ Ross in Mountain View, California.
Each week on Video Game Hangover, we talk about the games that have been keeping us up at night. On this week's show, that list includes Lil Gator Game and Street Fighter 6.
Just want to correct you, that's Lil Gator Game.
I struggle with that. I've, back in the 90s, I used to call the band Salt and Pepper.
Oh, so formal of you.
I know, really.
One ticket to the Salt and Pepper show, please.
Thanks, Jeeves. Yes, yeah. I have trouble with generational language and abbreviations and or whatever little what's the word I'm looking for? Counts as.
I have no idea. I'm still thinking about Salt and Pepper.
Salt and Pepper.
Yeah. Amazing.
Mr. 50 cents.
Oh, wow. Well, it's getting a little ahead.
I'm not good at rap. Can anybody tell? Yeah. So Lil Gator Game.
There you go. It's just a little one. Just a little Gator game.
Little Street Fighter 6.
Yeah. Just a little. Oh, man. That would be something.
Street Fighter 6 for babies.
It's been a long time since Pocket Fighter. They should make another one of those.
Is that a thing? I've never heard of that. What is that?
Oh, yeah. It was like, it's in that recent collection of fighting games that Capcom put out, but it's like a bunch of Street Fighter and Darkstalkers characters, but they're just small.
Oh.
It's good. They're like hitting each other with stop signs and stuff like that. It's very silly.
Excellent. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Good, clean fun.
Put that in your backlog. Yeah, it's fine.
Well, good.
Anyway, what were we talking about? Oh, alligators?
We're doing a podcast. Yeah. The Little Alligator Game.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's how we get into this.
Speaking of the 90s, we had a rollicking conversation.
Speaking of the night. Oh, yeah, I guess we were.
On our Discord today about critical gaming memories from the 90s. And I guess the big test is here, was anybody in our Discord alive during the 90s or old enough to play video games? Yeah. And not just me. But yeah, as it turned out, there were a few
plenty
people
of
who
people
had
were.
Yeah, some gaming memories from the 90s. This was inspired by a conversation on Twitter about music memories from the 90s, like favorite albums. As I want to do occasionally, has found a way to turn it back to video games. So I'll ask you here on the show, DJ, put you on the spot.
Favorite video game music albums from the 90s?
Yeah, there you go. No, favorite video games of the 90s. What were you playing in the 90s? What was, what were you playing on this day in 1994?
This day, on this January 16th or whenever the show comes out. I don't know. I feel like most of the video games I played were in the 90s. Like that was video games heyday to me. I don't know.
A golden age.
It really felt like it. It felt like, video games could do no wrong. It was the age of the Super Nintendo and the PlayStation 1. And to some extent the N64, depending on who you talk to.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I have a hard time narrowing it down to just one definitive game, because I played so many just like landmark games back then. You really pressed me, I have to pick one game from the 90s. Oh, I don't even know if I could do it. I could maybe do like a top 3.
I mean, in your defense, most of the people on our Discord struggled with that as well, because we ended up with this wall of video games of sort of like, this game from the 90s, and this one, and this one, and this one. So yeah, none of us are good at narrowing it down to just one or two games. I struggled with doing that with records from the 90s as well during on the Twitter thread. So it's hard, particularly as you sort of get, I think, far enough away from some of these things that objectivity goes out the window to a certain degree, and it becomes this emotional response more than anything, where you're like, I love that album, but yeah, some of the songs aren't very good.
Well, so you're just talking about your favorite game?
Favorite things,
the game that, or the album or whatever that defined the 90s to you? Yeah,
more or less.
Oh, yeah, I still don't even know. Probably
no, that doesn't help, no.
I mean, like I said, I played so many games in that span. What is the most influential one? Or what is the most memorable one? It would have to be. I mean, I think the answer to both these questions, which is my personal favorite game, and which is like the sort of like objectively most 90s game, would have to be one of those like just juggernaut games. Like I might say Street Fighter 2,
No.
Super Mario World, Doom, Final Fantasy 7. Yeah,
I figured we were going to get to Final Fantasy eventually, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, if I was going to pick one to me, I would say Final Fantasy 4, because that was sort of the first, like, full Final Fantasy that I played, and one of the first, like, RPGs. So that was, like, my introduction to that entire realm.
Yeah.
But in terms of just greater influence, I think it's definitely 7. Because that was what Final Fantasy IV was to everybody else. Because it was like, oh, I've never played a game like this before. I had no idea games could be like this.
Oh.
But, like, yeah, Street Fighter 2 is pretty big. Doom. I know people were giving a shout out to, like, Wolfenstein 3D. But, like, how many people played Wolfenstein 3D? Really? I think it's, Doom. I mean, it's another case where Doom was not the first, but it really blew the lid off that genre.
Right. I mean, I certainly didn't know what Wolfenstein was until much, much later, but I've always known what Doom is.
Yeah, I have yet to play Wolfenstein 3D. Oh, that's a backlog thing for this year.
Hey.
All right, we'll do a 90s backlog this summer.
Excellent. That sounds horrible.
How does that sound horrible? It's going to be great.
Sorry, this was my idea, wasn't it? Damn it. No, I only had like periodic and occasional access to consoles in the 90s. So my memories are very sort of like chunky. I had a Game Boy, the original Game Boy, which came out in '89, but certainly, I didn't get it on release day or anything. So inevitably came into my life much later. So there was, a lot of Tetris and a lot of Mario and a lot of other those things. I mentioned in Discord that Tetris is the only game to this day that I've ever seen my father play. And he was obsessed with it in a way that we used to have to like negotiate for time on the Game Boy. Nice. And then he eventually got his own to play Tetris. So I have an associated memory of him and I playing competitive Tetris against each other with the little link cable that you connected between your Game Boys. That had to be early 90s. And then in late 90s, I was in college and I had a roommate who had a PlayStation 1 and had a 3DO. So I have memories of playing his games, essentially. I played a lot of Gex. I played a lot of You Don't Know Jack. I played Way of the Warrior, a fighting game that was very much like a Mortal Kombat kind of spin-off.
Yeah. Off-brand Mortal Kombat.
Very off-brand, I think, yes.
Well, that's the thing. It's because of Street Fighter 2. Everybody was like, we got to have our own Street Fighter 2. We got to make our own weird fighting game. They were a dime a dozen.
Yeah. And then I get into the very end, the tail end of the 90s, 99. I finally had my own system as an adult. I had a Nintendo 64. And that, of course, came with GoldenEye and came with Perfect Dark. I did have a copy of Quake for the Nintendo 64. I remember that. Not fondly, but I remember sort of struggling my way through it. But yeah, quite obsessed with Perfect Dark and would just play that game endlessly. Just would get on the little speeder bike and just drive around to all corners of the game. Like really doing any objectives or doing things, not doing video game stuff, just stress testing it in a lot of ways and playing around with the tools. So yeah, that was always a good time.
That was one of the first games I can remember where there was stuff to do outside of just playing the game. Because it had this, the interface was unique because instead of menus, I mean, it still had menus, but between playing the campaign or playing deathmatch or whatever, you were just in the facility in that game. You could wander around to like the weapons range or the hover bike garage and, try and take the hover bike inside the building where it's not supposed to be. But I always really enjoy when there's just like kind of a lobby area in a game. And it's not just like, oh, you finished stage 1. Well, we're shipping you right off to stage 2 so you can continue.
Feel free to look at a menu for some time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect Dark was, I don't know, was super eye-opening to me as a video game. Like, video games could have characters and could have story, and you know, it was and it was one of the few games. And yeah, obviously Grand Theft Auto was a thing at that time, but it was one of the few games that I remember getting my hands on that felt like it had an openness to it, where you could kind of walk around and explore and do stuff.
Yeah.
That was not like video game objective stuff. That was just sort of like, oh, what's this door do? Where does this room go to? And yeah, I again, my memory and history with video games is weirdly missing a lot of time. But I remember being kind of blown away by Perfect Dark because of all of those things.
Yeah. Similarly, I remember thinking when Mario 64 came out that, like, this feels like as close as we're going to get to virtual reality in my lifetime. Like, being able to actually step onto the holodeck from Star Trek, because you could just walk around in 3D, and it like wasn't great looking 3D, but you could just go wherever you wanted that you could see on the screen, and that was mind blowing coming from the Super Nintendo.
Right.
I guess I just had this notion that technology would not advance significantly after this, because now we actually have virtual reality headsets, which are much better than Mario 64. But for some reason, that technology just always seemed unattainable.
Are they, though?
Well, I mean, yes, they're better than Mario 64. Well, I mean, like, technology-wise.
Sure, the technology is further advanced then, yes.
Yeah, no, but you have a point. I probably would rather spend time playing Mario 64 than playing, like, I don't know. What do people play in virtual reality? That question still kind of eludes me.
Beat Saber.
Beat Saber. Yeah.
No dig on Beat Saber. I love watching people play that game, but I think I would be horrible if I tried to play it myself.
How about that PlayStation VR 2? You're going to drop $6,000-$7,000 on that thing?
No. No. Is that a surprise to you? No.
No, it's not. I'm just like kind of wondering. I personally still don't. I haven't reached the tipping point in regards to like a VR system.
Yeah. What's the use case? I don't quite understand. Like, who is using these and for what?
Why do they other than playing Beat Saber?
Yeah. And they clearly have to be making somebody money. They're not making Meta any money because they keep firing people. But Sony keeps making these things. They must sell them, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Well, we'll see. I think that new one comes out soon, doesn't it?
I truly don't have a sense of it. I have no idea.
Okay, well.
Yep.
Check back next week when
I've slept on that. Yes, yeah.
I do some research. I thought it was this month or like this quarter at least. But again, like, I'm also not the person to ask.
Yeah. You started this conversation. So
yeah, I know. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I got us derailed off the '90s video games.
You're not doing your heavy lifting on the other end. But yeah. So, well, thank you for indulging that, DJ. That was fun. We would encourage anybody.
So what's your definitive '90s game?
Definitive '90s game, probably Perfect Dark.
Perfect Dark. That was so late, though. Perfect Dark. Okay, so like 1989, and then there are no games until 1999.
1999, yeah.
Okay, well, I mean that's fair. Those are both very good games.
I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of weird gaps in between, so I don't think I have a good like continuity to gaming in the '90s. Certainly curious to what other people's experiences were. That's
why we're doing a '90s backlog this year.
Yeah. Now, if you want to talk about the best albums of the '90s, I have strong opinions on that.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
I was paying very close attention. So, yeah. But yeah, so for our listeners, if you guys want to hang out with us and talk about video games, talk about your favorite whatevers from the '90s, you can certainly get a link to our Discord. Join up with us, chat about all this stuff. Go to VGHangover.com for a link, an invite link to the Discord, and jump in there and say hello.
I'd probably go with Super Mario World. Is that my answer? I don't know. I'm just immediately questioning it.
Yeah. I didn't keep up with Mario. I think there was a thought in my head that felt like that was a game for kids.
What? I mean, it kind of was.
Yeah. But... I mean, I was a teenager in the '90s, so it was
I see. Yeah. Okay.
Got it. There was a part like, that's for babies, Give me Silent Hill.
Give me a Sega Genesis.
Yeah.
Sonic for adults.
Right. Yeah. It does for Nintendo.
Cool teenagers, anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I dismissed Mario until I reached the age of consent and was able to go back and explore some of those things and realized just kind of how groundbreaking and fun it was.
Have you ever played Super Mario World?
Is that one of the 3 that came in that like collector's edition thing that came out a couple years ago with
No, those
Galaxy?
Those were all 3D. It was like Mario 64. But no, Super Mario World's on the Nintendo Online thing.
Oh.
I mean, like
I have to
everything
look
is
at
at
it.
this point.
Yeah.
What with the Yoshi?
Yes, then?
Yes? Oh, okay.
That sounds familiar. Yeah, I would have to look at it. I've played a lot of these Mario games at some point or another, but it's the old ones especially, it's hard to tell them apart.
All right. Well,
sorry, I'm not making friends with these comments. I apologize. Should take this up to 2023. What are we playing lately? What is going on in the world of Street Fighter 6?
Yeah, well, I didn't play this lately, but it happened while we were on break last year. They had another open beta for Street Fighter 6, which is coming out this year.
Which we've talked about a little bit on the show already. It has made its way onto my radar, and I don't
has it?
pay attention to Street Fighter.
Why are we talking about Street Fighter 6? Oh, it's because it's got that fancy new control scheme, I think. That's why.
It has sort of the sloppy gamer control scheme.
Well, that's not what it's called, but yes, effectively.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by it, but it also has kind of an arcade setup. Speaking of video game lobbies, is that you essentially have to wait in line for your turn to play Street Fighter.
That's partially true.
But in a fun way.
Right.
So yeah, those are the things about Street Fighter that have kind of made its way onto my radar, but this is your segment, and you actually played the game, so I'll defer to you.
Actually, could we do a segment where you talk about Street Fighter 6?
Sure. Well, I think we just did it. Did we not?
Oh, that was it. Oh, man. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
But anyway, so like I said, they had another beta while we were on break, so I didn't get to talk about it. And first of all, I went through their NDA or whatever, like the agreement for this beta was, multiple times to make sure that this was going to be okay to discuss. And nowhere in it did I see anything about, don't talk about stuff that was in the beta. The closest thing that I saw was, it was actually very difficult for me to interpret what exactly they were getting at. But I think it was like, don't say anything, don't like reveal anything that is sort of revealed by the beta.
Do not at any time look Zangief directly in the eyes.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just goes without saying. But I feel like everybody's been talking about the beta since then, so I feel like it's okay. There was nothing in there that strictly said, absolutely do not discuss this. But if it turns out that next week I'm not on the show, it's because I was assassinated by Capcom's lawyers or something like that. So that'll be why.
Oof.
But
are you sure you want to do this? That sounds pretty dire for a Street Fighter game.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, okay.
Things need to be said. No, I don't know. It was kind of it felt like kind of an exclusive beta because you had to go through this whole application process, and not everybody who applied got an invite. So that was interesting. Like, why did they send me one? That's weird.
How were they vetting people for this?
Oh, who knows? Some shady dealings at Capcom HQ. But anyway,
they're just going by height. They just lined everybody up by height.
Yeah.
The 50 tallest got in. Yeah.
They find out that the taller people are better at Street Fighter for some reason. I don't know. But anyway, I was excited to get a chance to check it out because, I've been following this since the reveal. And everything I've seen so far looks so good, which I think is exciting, not just to like Street Fighter people, but to me because, I mean, I'm not as closely involved with Street Fighter as I was back in the 90s, but I follow it closely enough to know that like Street Fighter V had kind of a rocky start. And I believe it kind of recovered eventually because these games last for like several years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But it was still disheartening because I think of Street Fighter as like one of those great series that is just, embodies so many things that are great about like video games and competitive like multiplayer gaming, just like gaming communities. So I really want Street Fighter to always like do a really good job. So Street Fighter V seemed a little disappointing. And it was great to see Capcom coming back with Street Fighter 6. Initially, when they showed this off, again, kind of a lukewarm reaction to it. But then it kind of went dark for a while, and when they did the next reveal, they did like a new logo reveal and had this cool new trailer and showed off like the new art style, and everything just looks incredible. It really looks like they have like sort of regrouped after Street Fighter V and are putting a lot of work into this one to make it really exciting and something that people will enjoy.
So what was so divisive about Street Fighter V upon release that it's worth noting?
On release, I think, well, so at the core, just I guess people weren't thrilled with the gameplay, which I did not play enough Street Fighter V to fully understand sort of like the shortcomings of it.
Mm-hmm.
But there are like some gameplay issues. It was also it was attempting to be this like live service Street Fighter thing.
Oh, gotcha.
And for the most part, I think it was like they had the right ideas, but there are some systems that were not implemented very well or just not in a popular way. There was like this whole sort of like in-game currency that you could use to unlock things. There were like in-game events, which I was not really a fan of, like these limited in-game events. And then to a lesser extent, like people had issues with like the art style and I think maybe the character roster. But I did not play enough Street Fighter V to feel like I should be the one to voice complaints on here.
Right.
I just know that it was not the most popular Street Fighter after it felt like, Street Fighter 4 was a big like revival for the series and generally pretty well received.
Yeah, Street Fighter 4 is the Street Fighter that I generally associate with Street Fighter because it was at some point or another on everything. At that point, even the 3DS. So there was a pervasiveness to Street Fighter 4 that could not be ignored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like they did a really good job with Street Fighter 4.
And it sounds like you're not hearing any of those sort of rumblings of concern about Street Fighter 6 in its kind of early stages.
No. Everybody seems really excited about it. Cool. And yeah, I got a lot of that buzz just from hearing people playing the first round of the beta, which kind of was what got me inspired to even sign up for the second round because I thought, well, okay, I want to see what it's all about. So I got into it, and yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, it's hard to get sort of a full impression of the entire game or what is going to be in the entire game at release just from this a couple days of playing the beta because it wasn't even the full experience. But what it let you do was check out this new Battle Hub area, which is the aforementioned sort of like virtual video arcade where you actually create a custom 3D avatar who you steer around this virtual arcade and sit down in front of a Street Fighter cabinet and challenge people. Which is fun because I feel like more and more people enjoy just having this sort of lobby experience in video games. Like between rounds, you can chat with other players, you can just kind of hang out and see what other people are up to. You could go to a weird cosmetic shop.
Like meta layer to it too, and that you DJ are not playing Street Fighter, you're playing a character who's playing Street Fighter.
Yes, yeah. I wasn't really sure what to make of that. I was like, so is this avatar supposed to be me? Am I going to be fighting as this avatar at some point? Which I think when you're actually when you're actually playing a Street Fighter, you're just playing a Street Fighter character, so you're not playing as this avatar.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also this mode that was not in the beta called World Tour, which is like a single player campaign, and I think that further involves your avatar.
Oh, interesting.
We'll see how that shakes out later on. But it was fun just hanging out in this lobby. Kind of, I mean, it felt a little bit like being back in an arcade, just seeing people huddled around these cabinets. And occasionally you just see somebody sort of sitting at one by themselves and think, oh, well, should I sit down across from them? Or, I mean, seems like they're just waiting for somebody to do that. But
yeah. If you walk up to another cabinet in this virtual arcade, can you watch two other people playing Street Fighter?
I didn't try that. So
okay.
Unfortunately I can't answer that. I actually found
it would make sense to me that would be the case, but
it seems like you should be able to. You can definitely watch replays of fights that have happened. And I'm sure you'll be able to create like a custom lobby eventually and just have a bunch of people watching everybody else in the lobby fight. But despite having this whole virtual setup, I found it was much easier to just go into one of the menus and sort of queue up for a new match, because actually sitting down at a machine, I actually think that's where the custom lobby is supposed to happen, because you sit down and you're just playing against whoever is sitting across from you, or you can play the computer. But there's this other setting, which is I think it's called fight requests, or at least that's what it was called in previous games, where you just have this on, and as you are doing other things in the arcade, whether you're playing against the computer, or you're in the training mode, or you're playing one of the other Capcom arcade games that are just available to check out while you're sort of biding your time, you will eventually get a fight request from another player, and then you'll just get tossed into a typical Street Fighter match.
Yeah.
So you can just go into the menu and queue up for that at any time. So I would just kind of do that. Because as cool as the lobby was, I was like, well, I don't want to spend this whole beta just hanging out in the lobby. I want to get some fights in to see what it's all about.
And would you would use the fight request to specify conditions, settings for how you would want to play the game? Is that, why wouldn't you just jump into the first available game? Why do you need to be requested?
Oh no, that's just the name of it. Once you sign up for it, it just puts you in the queue and gives you the next available one. I think with this setting, you can pick from ranked versus casual, but it's not like you would. I don't think you would go in and actually do a lot of custom round settings. You could change the match length, the number of points to win, and stuff like that. I think that you would do that in a different lobby.
Oh, that's kind of what I imagined. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that if there was somebody else in the world who was like, oh, that's exactly how I want to play Street Fighter 6. This is the person I want to play with. It would kind of match you up.
Yeah, I don't know how that would work. I think that might be more like a custom lobby setting, which will also be in the game, from what I understand. But it felt like this fight request thing was really just about getting you into a game as like a typical, standard rule Street Fighter match as quickly as possible.
Slappers only in
yeah, every round in Street Fighter is slappers only.
Big head mode.
Yeah.
Excellent. No odd job.
No odd job, yeah. God, people design some weird looking custom avatars, which is to be expected, but just hanging out in the lobby, sometimes you see just this weird freak walk by, just oh geez, what is that? What was that just walked by? But that's,
is it a standard build your own in-game avatar, kind of toolkit?
Yeah, it felt very similar to the Monster Hunter avatar creator, which is not too surprising, I guess. But I don't remember seeing Monster Hunter characters that look as weird as some of the characters I saw in the Street Fighter 6 Battle Hub. So anyway, there's that. As far as the actual fighting goes, it felt really good. It felt like, what I expect from a Street Fighter game, just very fast and responsive, and very strategic. They have some new systems around this time, which I kind of I enjoyed, because they felt sort of like they had taken systems from previous Street Fighter iterations and just simplified them a bit. Mm-hmm. That was one of my issues with Street Fighter V. If there's one thing that I could identify as having an issue with, is the whole sort of super meter system in that game. I still I didn't play Zero Street Fighter V, but I played some of it, and I still don't fully understand how the super meter system worked in that game. Every character would kind of have their own super ability which would activate, and they all worked slightly differently, or at least that was my take on it. But in this, it feels much more unified. So you have kind of your traditional super meter, which builds up over time. And as it grows, or as it charges up, it allows you to execute your super arts, which are your big super moves. And instead of having to choose between different super arts at the start of the round, or at the start of the match, in this one, you just get 3 of them. And then you can execute one depending on how much meter you have stored up, which I think I really like. It always kind of bothered me that you would have to basically choose a loadout before previous Street Fighter rounds. And in this one, it just feels like you have more tools available to you. So I thought that was a very welcome change. But the big new system in this is called the Drive system, I believe, and it involves this new gauge called the drive gauge, which basically just allows you to execute sort of like situational moves. Again, very reminiscent of things from previous Street Fighter games. Like you have kind of a counter move, you have a, what do they call it? Everything in this game is involving this gauge is like a drive something. So I think you have like a drive counter, which is something I really like to see in a fighting game, because essentially if you get very good at predicting what your opponent is about to do, you can do this counter move and it will stop it and allow you to land a counter attack, which I think is a lot of fun.
A good counter in a game is always fun.
Yeah, I like that. A big thing of fighting games to me is just sort of like getting a good enough read on your opponent where you can sort of be one step ahead of them and predicting what they're going to do. Like, that feels really good to me.
Mm-hmm.
And a counter is, just sort of the quintessential way to express that, I think.
Right, yeah.
And then the big thing you can do with this drive gauge is something called drive impact, which I'm not totally sold on currently. What happens is it's a bit of a counter move, but you push a button combination and you execute this. I guess it's not really a stance, but it's like the special drive impact attack where it can effectively sort of like hit your opponent in the middle of an attack. It's been a while since the beta, so I'm trying to remember exactly how this worked. But basically, you would start this attack, and even if you get hit during the attack, I mean, depending on what you're getting hit with, you could potentially basically cancel it out and hit your opponent, and then they're vulnerable, and you can sort of follow through with that. Which seems not too different from just predicting what they're going to do and having that drive counter ready.
Yeah.
But in some cases, and I can't tell if this is just because I was brand new to the system and I'm not like fully understanding the potential of it, it felt like this was sort of a move that you could just toss out and either you get a cool attack out of it, or the opponent hits you and then you cancel that attack anyway, and then you can just start attacking them. So to me, it felt like kind of a panic button, or at least that's how I felt it was being used in a lot of the fights I was in, where I would just be, trying to hit them, and then they would throw out this drive impact, and then suddenly, I'm getting countered and they're doing their little counter follow-up. And I wasn't quite sure how to respond to that other than just being smart about when they're going to use drive impact and not attacking them or like getting out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
It felt a lot to me like there was a system in the recent Soul Calibur called, what was it called? It was not guard impact, which is a real system in Soul Calibur. It was, I forget the name of it, but it was very similar because you would enter into the stance, and then if the opponent hit you in that stance, it would more or less turn into a rock, paper, scissors game where you and your opponent would each press a button, and if you had the right combination of buttons, like one of you would have the upper hand afterward. But it felt like it would really interrupt the whole flow of the match because it would, like, time would slow down. It would go into this like bullet time thing where you're like swinging your swords at each other slowly. It looked very like dramatic, but I couldn't stand it. It was just so disruptive. And so like drive impact in Street Fighter 6 is not quite as like round stopping as whatever that thing in Soul Calibur 6 was, but it did remind me of it. So I'm hoping that it's just a matter of like spending a little more time with the game to figure out the best ways to deal with it. Like if your opponent is just throwing this out all the time, like how to avoid it or how to counter it. Mm-hmm. Which I think, like, I don't think Capcom would put a system like this in their game if it was just going to be awful. So I have confidence in them, and I think I just need to sort of like wrap my brain around it a little more.
Right. Some of the appeal of this stuff is that kind of push-pull that for every, for everything they sort of throw your way, there is something you can kind of pitch back.
Yes, generally that's the case. That's why these work so well. If there's one trick I learned about using a drive impact towards the end of the beta is I felt that overall people kind of forget it exists because it's new to the game and it sort of feels like this extra thing that was added to it. So what I'd like to do
and people are trying to play it like previous Street Fighter games, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So what I would do is I would pull out one of these moves and like in the middle of the round, whenever. And I noticed that when I did that, my opponent would tend to like use one of them as a follow-up or very shortly afterwards. So you could kind of bait people into using these.
Sure.
Because it was like, oh, hey, remember a drive impact?
Oh,
Maybe you should do a
Yeah.
drive impact. And then they did, and I would just like hit them with a fireball or whatever. So that was kind of fun. Like that's like what it comes down to me, is just like tricking your opponent into doing things. It's a lot of fun.
Right. And then having the counter for that kind of queued up, right?
Yes, yeah.
That's clever.
So anyway, a little wary about that. Overall, I'm cautiously optimistic about it. Like, I think it'll be fine, whatever it ends up being. But man, I just had a lot of fun playing Street Fighter that one weekend. It's been a while since I spent this much time playing a fighting game online.
Cool.
And I have to admit, initially, I was just like, well, I spent all this time getting to this beta, and I was just having all these hangouts about just playing random video gamers online. Because typically that's not something that I really like to do. Whether it's in like Call of Duty or some other sort of directly competitive online thing, I just don't need to deal with sort of the stress of getting owned by little kids online. It's just what I feel like happens. People who are just way better at the game than me and that are just obnoxious about it. But once I was able to get over that, I was like, well, it's going to be pointless getting into this beta if I just play like Magic Sword in the Capcom arcade the whole weekend. I actually had a lot of really good matches, and I feel like, it's hard to tell because I wasn't chatting with my opponents or anything, but I feel like everybody else was sort of the same mindset, where they're not here to just like own noobs online. They're here to play Street Fighter, which was nice. And I especially really like the cases where you would get into a match and somebody would win, and I don't know if it was like a close match or what, but you get kicked back to the versus screen and you have the option to rematch them or request a rematch. And a lot of the times, like I would win a round or win a match, and then they would just hit the rematch button, which I think is nice. I think it's like there's a tendency to be like, oh, I lost this guy. Well, screw that. I'm going to go on to the next one, find some easy target to take out.
Right.
But I had a lot of these cases where I would get into a match with this same opponent over and over, and we would just go for like 9 or 10 rounds, no matter like who was winning or losing. And it just felt like a very wholesome experience.
I think that there's a balance objective that has to be there too as well. And again, I don't play a ton of fighting games, but you have to think you can beat the other person. Mm-hmm. So it has to presumably not be a complete shutdown. It has to be close enough that you feel like, oh, we'll do it one more, and I'll probably be able to take him next time.
Yeah. Well, to some extent. But I think what's notable is I had a lot of matches that would go, like, I was clearly just, like, beating them up. Or, it would go the other way, too. I would fight somebody, and I was like, I don't have any chance against this guy.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, like, I was still just trying to learn how Street Fighter 6 works, so I would hit the rematch button. And then, sometimes so would my opponent. Like, I had one round or one series of matches where I probably beat the guy, like, 7 or 8 times in a row. And they would still just keep on hitting rematch instead of sending me a nasty comment online.
Excellent.
But I thought it was really good. I felt like, there definitely was sort of that potential, like they could have taken it at any point.
Yeah.
But I think it's good that people are just willing to stick it out and play some Street Fighter, hopefully.
Yeah, have some fun with it.
Yeah, maybe learn a little bit. That's what I was trying to get out of it, just playing these guys who would just wipe the floor with me. I was like, okay, so how do I prevent that from happening again?
Yeah. You queue up for the next match, and they're all, you again.
Yeah. I mean, on some hand, they're probably like, sure, I'll take another win on my record.
Sure, I'll beat you one more time. Yep.
Yeah. But, I don't know. So I had a really good time with it.
Cool. It sounds like a fun event.
Yeah.
This is still pretty far away from coming out, right? It's like June or something.
I don't think they've announced the actual release date. They say it's sometime this year.
Oh, I just did a little Google, and it said June 2nd, 2023.
Okay, well, coming out June 2nd, I guess.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Unless that's a lie. Who knows? But
I don't know. The last time I checked, I don't think they announced a release date, but
got it.
I easily could have missed it. The last two things I want to talk about from this beta, which I hope I'm allowed to talk about, were the control schemes, which we kind of touched on. they have a whole bunch of different control options in the beta, which which features sort of the classic Street Fighter setup to begin with, which is 3 punch buttons and 3 kick buttons of various strengths, and then you do the sort of typical like half circle, quarter circle motions and combinations to do your special moves. That was very familiar. That's still in here. They have an updated one called Modern Controls, which is simplified and actually felt a little bit like playing Smash Brothers, because you have kind of a basic attack button, and then you have a special move button, which does different things depending on what direction you're pressing when you hit the special move button.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just sort of supposed to be an easy way to sort of figure out what your character is capable of. Like what their special moves are, when the best times to use them are, and just allow you to do that without having to master all the like motions that go along with them. So that was interesting, and I think I fought a bunch of people online who were using this control scheme because it would tell you what your opponent is using before each round, and like some of them were doing pretty well with it. So that was good to see. It doesn't seem to be like hampering anybody's performance, and it also doesn't seem to be like super overpowered or anything. So that's also good. And then finally, they have this thing called the dynamic control scheme, which unfortunately was not in the beta test. But this is the one that you were sort of hinting at, where you just push a button and it sort of does like auto combos, or yeah. I think I've seen it described as like it does something that makes sense for whatever is happening on the screen at the time. So I guess maybe if your opponent is jumping at you, it'll throw out like an anti-air move or something. But basically just designed for just the most casual of Street Fighter matches where, maybe you just have a bunch of friends over and you want to mash some buttons. It's unfortunate that this wasn't available because I really want to see how like this feels to play with.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by that as well.
Like, I hope it's like satisfying. I hope it's not just, push a button and fireworks happen on the screen. but
oh no, I totally hope it's that. That's my wish. Yeah,
that could also be something good. They've said that this won't be available for online matches, which you could kind of understand why if it is just like auto Street Fighter.
Sure.
But sounds like it might be a good time for just local play. Oh, and then the last thing is they added this like live commentary feature, which if you've watched any of like EVO or like Street Fighter tournaments or like any fighting game tournaments over the last few years, there's always just a fight commentator speaking over the match like you would get at a sporting event or something. And this new commentary feature in Street Fighter 6 is basically trying to replicate that experience, which I think is actually a lot of fun. Although it's a little weird having it during the actual match that you're playing. I tried turning this on and like just to see how it was, just to sort of like hear how effective it was, if it sounded really artificial or anything. And I did this while I was trying to watch a replay because I thought, okay, well, this way I won't actually be playing. I'll just sort of see how authentic this commentary feels. Because it's like, it's not actually live. It's just a bunch of pre-recorded phrases that they play it, based on what's happening.
Right. That's cool though. I mean, there's a little bit of like, AI magic that has to happen there, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, maybe a little bit. So I started watching this replay and yeah, it's like, it feels like you're watching a live tournament or something. And then because I had fight requests still turned on, I got interrupted and I got pulled into a match and the commentary stayed on. So I started playing this match and there was like James Chen just explaining everything that I was doing on the screen. And he was like, oh, what's he doing? Just waited in the corner. Somebody's going to attack here. And it's like, oh, jeez. This is really distracting suddenly.
Getting called out by a robot.
Yeah. But it was also kind of, so first of all, I like turned that off as quickly as possible. I don't think it's something I want during live matches, but I can also see it as being kind of an interesting tool if you're not really familiar with, like you're not a pro Street Fighter player or anything. You don't really know all of the tactics available. Because sometimes it'll say things like, oh, they're not spending any of their meter, or maybe like they're going to come out with a big counterattack whenever the opponent jumps in. Like you might get ideas out of what they're saying.
Sure.
So I think that could be interesting. But other than that, I think I'm probably going to leave it off during matches and just rely on it during like replays or if I'm watching somebody else, because it is a lot of fun. It adds a lot of sort of excitement to get the sort of play-by-play, even if it is not actually from a real person observing the fight.
Yeah, what a cool way though to like kind of watch the game tape after a match and see what the commentators think you should have done.
That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to watch one of my own replays and just see like, oh, so how would that have been during a tournament? And then I just got sucked into an actual fight and had to deal with it. So that was a lot of fun. They have a bunch of English language commentators and then some Japanese ones as well, which I thought, oh, well, maybe that's something I could deal with. If there was just a Japanese guy yelling at me during the match, that might be exciting. But it did, like, for the most part, feel pretty authentic. It's like not as, obviously it can't be super specific to whatever's happening because they have to have all these things written out beforehand. But I think it'll be a lot of fun. I think it's a really cool feature.
Hey. Man, it sounds like they're just packing it full of kind of interesting stuff.
They're doing a lot with this game, it feels like. Like they've got these big three headlining modes. They've got all these new systems. They've got like a whole sort of new cast of characters coming in. They're saying it's like the new generation of Street Fighters, which is exciting. And the most exciting thing is it seems like everything is like turning out really well so far. It seems like it's been received much better than Street Fighter V, or at least the last time I checked the forums. So I will just cross my fingers and hope everything goes well up to June or whenever.
Right.
I really hope that the new control schemes may sort of open it up to new people playing Street Fighter, because I think for the longest time, it's like fighting games in general have been very intimidating to get into.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But like if you could just hop in and play it sort of like Smash Brothers. There's even like a Smash Brothers style mode where just crazy things will happen during a round. Like I think, like I didn't actually play this mode, but there will be like obstacles or like hazards or stuff happening in the stage. So very much not a traditional Street Fighter match, but it's kind of a little bit extra. Could be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. My first thought was, I'm not going to spend $60 or $70 to play Street Fighter, but if I was at PAX with some friends and this was available in the little gaming lounge, you know what I mean? I would check out a PS5 and play Street Fighter with some people and just play that, that auto fight mode, basically.
Yeah. That's the last thing about it, is that I don't think they've discussed sort of if there are going to be any free-to-play models available or versions available. But I've always thought that would be so good for a fighting game, like kind of the League of Legends model, where like the whole game is free, and there's League of Legends would just have a free 1 or 2 characters every week, and they would rotate. I don't even know if they still do this anymore, because it's been so long since I played League of Legends.
Yeah.
But basically just make some part of the game available. And if you want to try out some other part, then like you pay for that part. But just always have some free way to access the game so you can check it out.
Sure.
I think that would be perfect for a fighting game.
I mean, it basically serves as an ongoing demo at that point. And if you're trying to get your friends to check out this cool game with you and they want to jump in for free and like it enough to want to buy it, or like it enough to want to buy it to hang out with you, that works. I think that's pretty clever.
Yeah, maybe they're just hanging out in the lobby. Maybe maybe they have to pay some money to actually unlock a character to do fights, but they just want to spectate. Like, that would be cool, too.
You got to put your quarter down on the console if you want to play.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that was my time with Street Fighter 6. Had a lot of fun with it.
Nice. Do you think this is something you would buy at release? Does it feel like a must-have?
I'm not like, I'm going to get this day one or whatever, but I wonder how much of that is just me not wanting to fight people online, which is the same thing, the same hurdle I had to get over when, like at the start of the beta. So maybe I'll check it out.
Cool. So man, the game that I played could not be any different. Lil Gator Game is a fun little open world exploration and adventuring toolbox, essentially, or sandbox is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
You are a little alligator who is hanging out in the summer vacation with your sister, but she's very focused on schoolwork. She's got her laptop and she's trying to get a report done, and you're trying to sort of bait her into playing with you and having adventures like you used to do when you were younger, and she's just too caught up with school. So you go out on your own. You're trying to link up with your friends who are all over this island, this park that you play at. You want to construct the most kind of elaborate and appealing adventure for your sister. You feel like if you can get all of your friends and everybody on the island to help you, she'll close her laptop and you guys can have some summertime fun together.
Yeah.
And then the game kind of turns into Breath of the Wild. Essentially, you run all over this island and do adventure things. The game sort of wears its influences pretty clearly. In fact, you wear a little green hat in the beginning, and you insist that I wear this green hat because the hero from the video game does.
Okay.
And so you take a lot of inspiration from clearly The Legend of Zelda. But you have all the same tools that that Link does in Breath of the Wild. You can go shield surfing. You get a little hang glider that allows you to get from point to point on the island. You get the little circular stamina meter as you climb up on things. It really feels very much like kind of the entire toolkit that you have at your disposal in Breath of the Wild, in a cute little super colorful kind of nostalgia driven indie game that looks an awful lot like a short hike. It's all very sort of like cozy and cell shaded. You have a lot of like leaves falling off of trees and babbling water and stuff like that, and it feels very sort of natural, but has all these fun little objectives all over the island for you to do. You get a lot of upgraded different weapons and costume pieces and different shields, but they're all junk. They're all like found objects. There's nothing shiny. There's nothing, choo-choo polished in this. Your first shield is a garbage can lid. Your first sword is made out of cardboard. Actually, your first sword is a stick and it breaks, and then you make one out of cardboard.
Oh.
And on and on. And there's tons of different things you can kind of upgrade and unlock as the game goes. But they're all things that a kid would play with, that a kid would craft on their own or would find on the ground. All the enemies in the game are skeletons or slimes, kind of traditional video game monsters. But they're all cardboard standees, essentially. So you go up to them with your cardboard sword and you take a couple of whacks at them and they explode into confetti.
That's very wholesome.
It's super wholesome, yeah. And confetti is the currency in the game. So you scoop all that up and you can use it to, fuel upgrades and things like that.
So they're not actually like transforming into real monsters or anything because of your active imagination or anything. They remain cardboard cutouts that you attack.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They don't put up much of a fight. They're really there as a collectathon more than anything. They're there for you to transform into currency.
Okay.
They're not meant to be this great sort of battle. But it's fun that they're all over the island. There's hundreds of them. The game counts them for you. And they're all over the place.
You gotta track them all down.
Right, yeah. And they're hidden all over the place. So a lot of them require, upgrading your stamina so you can scale up these little mountainous cliffs to these little mountaintops where there's a pottery jar you can break that has a secret inside, or a couple of cardboard standees for representing enemies that have scaled to those heights and you have to fight them. And things like that. So again, very kind of nostalgia driven, very adventuring driven, and very exploration driven. There's two islands kind of connected by a bridge. One is sort of like the tutorial that kind of teaches you all the basics, and then they turn you loose on the Grand Island, which is this big sort of national park that you and your friends play in. And it's just a blast. There's no mini map. There's no list of objectives. You have things to do, but the game kind of gets out of your way and just lets you wander and explore. There's a downside to that too, as there are a couple of points in the game where I sort of felt like, what am I doing? What am I working on? I took like 2 or 3 days off from playing Lil Gator Game and then went back to it. And I was like, what was my objective? What was I trying to do? Mm-hmm. But the game doesn't tell you that, unfortunately. So it's not so big that you can't eventually kind of wander around and either pick up a new objective or find the thing that the start of the little mission you were given by one of your park friends. But yeah, I found myself sort of wishing for something that felt a little more guided. But that's not what Lil Gator Game clearly is trying to be. It really is meant to feel, I think, a lot like a toolbox. Essentially, I keep saying toolbox, sandbox. Using,
well, you have a toolbox of things you can do.
This is true. You're
in
not
the
wrong.
Sandbox.
A sandbox of things that you can kind of play with using the endlessly fun Breath of the Wild tools.
So it's sort of like Breath of the Wild without the combat.
Yeah. It's without the combat, without sort of the conflict, without all the sort of the the scary enemies and the weight of everything that sort of happens in a Breath of the Wild game or a Legend of Zelda game.
That's cool.
Yeah, you get there's some weight between you and your sister's relationship, and that she's sort of growing up and moving into a new part in her life, and you still want to hang out and have fun and play. So there are little like memory triggers you find around the island. And you find a jungle gym, and you'll be a little silhouette of you and a younger version of your sister playing there, and you can, push X when you stand next to it, and it gives you a couple of lines of dialogue of you and your sister having fun there. Again, it's just another little unlockable, a little collectible around the island. But other than that, it's not heavy, it's not maudlin, it's not sappy. It just kind of gets out of your way and lets you run around and play with these fun tools and explore this this really beautiful and quite expansive island.
All right, I was gonna say it sounds a little maudlin and sappy.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely like nostalgia, capital N. Like, remember when you used to play in the park with your, like, it feels very much like that's sort of the message of the game. But I don't ever feel like it kind of beat you over the head with it.
Okay, that's just that's just what the character in the game is experiencing.
Right. And you get, you have your little friends, your little school friends that are on summer vacation with you, and they're all over the park. And when you run into them, they're like, "What are you doing? What are you working on?" And they're like, "I'm having an adventure. I'm a hero having an adventure. Give me a mission." And they will think of something kind of fun, kind of video gamey, some challenge, run through these gates, climb to this peak, collect 10 of these things to give you, and then you're off doing that thing. So it has a very sort of knowing, not cynical, but like kind of insider jokey perspective on the structure of games and nostalgia and fun and things like that. So I think it does a lot of really interesting things without sort of, going up its own butt.
Oh, well, that's always good.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I had a really good time with it. This was a very late December release. I think this came out December 20 something. I played it on the Switch. It runs awesome on the Switch. You load into the game and then you're just there. The whole thing is available to you.
Oh, that's cool.
You never have load screens or anything. So there's a bit of a technical marvel that sort of feels like it's happening with this beautiful little indie game. Really cute soundtrack, really beautiful animation, tons of fun little things that you can kind of find and unlock. I had a really good time with it. So this is called Lil Gator Game, and clearly would recommend it.
Nice.
Yeah,
maybe, I guess, maybe there's a time and place for a smaller scale Breath of the Wild. Because I was thinking, everybody's talking about replaying Breath of the Wild before the sequel comes out, and I'm just like, are you kidding me? But maybe if there was one I could knock out on a weekend, which is like a 10th of the size.
Yeah.
And also, I assume, since you didn't mention weapon breaking or anything, you don't have to deal with that at all?
You do not have to deal with any of that. Nope.
Oh, that's great. Because when you mentioned shield surfing, I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot you could even do that in that game. Why didn't I spend more time doing that? And then I remembered, because all of my shields are far too valuable to use as just a surfboard.
Yeah.
So I'm never going to do this. So maybe I can finally do some shield surfing.
Yeah. You don't have to deal with any weapon or shield durability issues in Little Gator Game. Everything you have lasts forever. In fact, you have on-demand access to every tool that you ever find in the game. And you can swap between all of them on the fly, including some really cute costumes and stuff like that. So again, it's just a bunch of fun tools to kind of play around with in this beautiful environment. I would, I spent 200 hours playing Breath of the Wild. I could not imagine a scenario where I would want to do that again, as much as I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But I would hazard a guess that probably 50 to 60% of that was me just kind of futzing around with stuff.
That was my favorite thing about that game is
climbing to see what's on the other side or of a hill or something, or exploring ruins, or shield surfing, hang gliding, seeing how far I could go on a hang glider and stuff like that. And Lil Gator Game, that's the game. Like, you don't have to stress over Guardians or Ganondorf finding you. It really is just you playing around with all of Link's tools.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
And you're an alligator for some reason.
You're a tiny little alligator, and all of your friends are other sort of anthropomorphic animals.
Oh, they're not all alligators?
They're not all. No, just you and your sister, I believe, are the only.
This is not in the same universe as the crocodile game. Oh, no, those are all crocodiles. Wait. Were those alligators or crocodiles?
What game are you talking about?
In New Crocodile City or whatever it was.
Oh, right. What was that game?
It was a later alligator. I guess they were alligators.
Yeah, they were alligator, yeah.
Well, somebody needs to make a crocodile game.
Alligator New York City. I don't know if this is a sequel or if it's the indie game unified universe of alligators. I'm not sure. I didn't make that connection. I will have to explore that fully.
I was just surprised that somebody had made another game featuring alligators, but it's just one. And I guess as presumably your sister is also an alligator.
Your sister is also an alligator, correct? Yeah.
All right.
But all of your friends and all the people in the park are all different animals from the animal kingdom. Yeah.
It's coexisting. That's nice.
Peacefully, yes. Yeah, I really like this a lot. It was super cute. Could not recommend it more highly. I feel a little bad that it was sort of dumped at the end of the year over Christmas break. I don't know if enough people sort of are even aware of it existing. Everybody was playing, thousands of other things, or traveling to visit family, or opening Christmas presents, or whatever. So, go back to the Nintendo eShop and look for Gator Game, and check this out. It's a good time.
Cool. Sounds good.
Yeah. Pretty kid friendly too. I would add that. Certainly there's nothing in it that would, be construed as violent or unnecessarily difficult.
Yeah. So you don't just get terrifying guardian robots trying to murder you every once in a while.
That music starts and you're like, nope, I'm done. So yeah, I think if you've got a younger gamer, or somebody who's more of a wholesome gamer, in your collective, then this is a pretty easy recommendation as well.
Cool.
And that about does it, I think, right?
I think so. Yeah, that's everything. It has a lot of Street Fighter.
So it's good. That was interesting.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. If you need any more video game hangover in your brain, you should definitely follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/VGHangover. And you can always get show notes and links and tell us what you thought about this episode at VGHangover.com. We would love for you to hang out with us on Discord and chat about all kinds of things. You can get a link to that at VGHangover.com as well. And help us out by rating us, subscribing to us, recommending us, anywhere, the topic of podcasts come up. So Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all that other stuff. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, and, help us out by telling your friends about the show.
Yeah, really helps us get the word out, pull in new listeners. We appreciate it a lot. We're still lining up new music for the beginning of the year here. So for the last couple of weeks, I've just had some selections from one of my favorite FM synthesis albums. We have tracks from Keiichi Okabe, who went on to write the Nier soundtracks, and also Michiko Naruke from Wild Arms series, just providing our intro and outro music. So hope you enjoy it. You can't buy it anywhere, so just enjoy it on the show, I guess.
Appreciate it here because you won't get it anywhere else.
Yeah.
Excellent. We'll be back next week. Until then, this is Randy Dickinson.
This is DJ Ross.
Thanks for listening to Video Game Hangover. Goodbye.
Good night.
See ya.